by film.
5,
Stand by music.
4,
Stand by announce.
3, 2, 1.
And fade up.
Sneaky little oranges.
Spider-Man, hero or menace?
Deer Indigo.
Dobby the house elf.
Who holds sway over the 5 points?
I swear to God, I'll pistol whip the next guy that says shenanigans.
This is my family.
There's a hole in this cake.
You concur?
I'm a bloody island. I'm bloody Ibiza.
How about new, you crazy Dutch bastard?
All right, so welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the Brian Cox Movie Podcast.
I swear to God, I'll pistol whip the next guy that says shenanigans.
AKA 20 Years, 4 Beers.
BCP.
We are a podcast dedicated to rewatching movies from 2 decades ago while simultaneously enjoying a minimum of 4 modern beers. My name is Steve, and this is my big brother,
Tim.
And we are coming to you live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Live-ish. We have just watched and recorded our episode on Gangs of New York and sufficiently crapped on that movie quite a bit, actually. So go check that one out. And as usual, we sit together afterwards and discuss another film over another beer. So we refer to these as our happy hour episodes.
Hey, you guys. Happy hour is from 4 to 6.
During this happy hour, we will be talking about 2002's Spike Lee joint 25th Hour. 25th Hour is the story of the last day of freedom for Monty, a young former drug dealer who is on the precipice of incarceration after being betrayed by someone close to him. Arrested and convicted to 7 years in prison. He decides to spend these last hours reminiscing, partying all night with his best friends and girlfriend, and even spending time with his former employer, all while grappling with who turned on him, and if he will even be able to survive what is to come.
What up with that?
You know what happens to pretty boys like you in prison?
Ooh, they gonna love you.
Yeah, maybe. But then again, maybe not. Geez, Your Honor, you know, what can I say? I messed up. You know, my mother died. I was so worried about my father. I needed to help him out. My head was a little turned around. I got hooked in with the wrong people, and I made a big mistake. I really did, but it was my first time. I'm sorry, and it will never, ever happen again. Time served. Probation.
You don't read the papers much, do you, smart guy? In New York, we've got a wonderful thing called the Rockefeller laws. Let me educate you. You had a kilo in your sofa. That kind of weight makes it an A1 felony. 15 years to life minimum for first offense. Now, with that much spread in the sentencing guidelines, the judges take their cues from the prosecutors. So if Mr. Prosecutor's wife busted his chops that morning, you're f***ed. You're gone for good. If you get lucky, really lucky, and let's say he got some good trim the night before, maybe he'll plead you off to an A2. But that's still 3 to 8 for first time. Minimum. How much of that stretch you pull is all up to the mood of the prosecutor. And he's going to ask us, did he play ball?
Good summary.
Thank you. The film was written and directed by Spike Lee. It was written by him, right?
It was
no, it wasn't. It was adapted. I literally just wrote that down, and I was like, nope.
No, you got half it right.
David Benioff and somebody else.
David Benioff from his own novel.
Yeah, there we go. So the film is written by David Benioff, adapted from his novel, and directed by Spike Lee, and stars Edward Norton as Monty, Rosario Dawson, Barry Pepper, Philip Seymour, misspelled, Hoffman, Anna Paquin, and Brian Cox. Our first segment, as usual, is Drinking Buddies.
Come on, not my fucking beer.
Where we present the 4 beers that we had, 2 for each of us, since we watched this film separately, and give our expert drinking rankings. Tim, go right ahead and get it start.
I enjoyed from St. Louis Park, Minnesota, their Steel Toe Brewing, the Rainmaker Red IPA, which this time of year, it's great. It's kind of a nice transition moving out of summer into fall. And it's a classic style that they do really, really well. So You like that? Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
talk
I
about
see
that beer in a
what
second.
you
Yeah,
did. Okay,
yeah, yeah.
all right.
I see what you did there.
Well, I had to make sure there wasn't any goddamn pepper in
No,
it.
there was no
So,
bait and switch
Yeah.
for that. Their Rainmaker,
where was it? Where was it?
Rainmaker Red
I wasn't
IPA.
even listening to you. I was
Where?
making sure you didn't
Pouring a
betray
beer.
me. Yeah.
No, it's a 4.25 for me. It's
Okay.
one that comes out maybe not every bit. It's been a while. But this time of year, I love it. So then I also had Ursa Minor from Duluth, Minnesota. Their Cadillac Ranch Hand Hazy IPA. It's kind of become
It is good. Yep.
a pseudo flagship option for
Yeah.
them. In addition to like their kind of standard IPA, it's a 4 for me.
Mhm.
It's just a nice option of having a hazy in the fridge. So those are my options. What'd you have?
Well, in an effort to piss off JT, one of our favorites fans, I went with a really good beer and a very basic beer.
Just a basic bitch beer.
So I went with Central Waters Brewing Company out of Amherst, Wisconsin. Their tequila barrel aged key lime sour that you had a little bit of
It's
on
tasty.
the reunion. It's very good. 4.25 out of 5. It's so delicious that it makes really shitty beers better. As Tim found
Yeah.
out as we mixed it
Let's
with
pour this
the
in my
banquet
Coors.
beer. Or
Yep.
not even the banquet. It was a Coors Light, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Coors.
Oh, yeah. Let's
I
not
don't
slum
dabble
it
in the
too
light.
much. Right. Yeah.
The banquet beer. Don't besmirch the banquet beer.
Well, I can, especially when it was better with a key lime barrel aged
Pour that in
sour
there. It was quite tasty.
It was good.
Yep.
And then, so I didn't go all the way to Mick Ultra by any means, but I had the New Belgium Brewing Company out of Fort Collins, their Fat Tire Amber Ale. It's it's an amber ale, but I do remember that's such a classic example of, man, we used to seek, we used to seek that out,
God.
or it was,
Oh yeah.
and I think it's as good as it always was.
Yeah.
But the median has definitely risen when it comes to that. Also, amber ales are basic bitch beers, so
Yes.
let's just sort of like talk about that. But I had a 3.5 out of 5 because it's Fat Tire, and thanks, Dad, for having it in the fridge.
It's a classic.
So,
Yes.
those are my two, and then we're having what now?
In honor of the movie we're gonna watch, and apparently we
time
just
of year, I guess, right?
well time of year, but also oddly that we watched like 2 movies set in New York.
I know.
We didn't plan it this
it's
way.
like
We're
a
like,
plan.
huh.
In fact, we totally changed up this month in the
Yes,
first place.
and they were
It was
like last
random.
minute change. We're like, oh yeah, New York movies of Gangs in New York, and then 25th Hour set there. I decided, let's have a seasonal as well as geographic option. Brooklyn Brewery, their Oktoberfest Marzen Lager, and for me, it's like a 3.75. It's hard to mess up
If you make a bad Oktoberfest,
right?
I don't know if I could ever go to your brewery
Yeah.
again.
It's
I've never once had one. I've never had an Oktoberfest. I have ones that I like better. I like Polaner Oktoberfest
like
and that
true
kind of stuff.
kind of stuff,
Like
yeah.
a true Oktoberfest,
Yeah.
like more American Oktoberfest. But how can you mess this up? I agree. It's like 3.75. You just go, all right, it's good. It's good. Yep. All right. So it's good. Our next segment is our reaction. Next segment is the Social Network,
If you guys were the inventors of Facebook, you'd have invented Facebook.
where we take a look back at the critical and fan reception from 20 years ago. As usual, Tim is nice enough to research these, so please take it away.
The IMDb rating is 7.6 out
And
of
what was
10.
Gangs in New York is about
7.5.
Oh,
It was just below, which I was like, this is kind of weird.
I know,
But
I mean, just we're talking about my feelings for this movie, both holding up or not or whatever. But justice.
Yes. So 7.6 out of 10. Alan Morrison of Empire Magazine said, one of the more entertaining and thought-provoking Spike Lee joints in a long while. Jeff Stark of Salon said, a clumsy story about the moral quandary of a drug dealer who more or less deserves to go to jail. And Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 out of 4.
Same as Gangs.
Same as
Look at
Gangs in New
that.
York.
Wow.
So the film is unusual for not having a plot or a payoff. It is about this end of this stage of Monty's life. And so there is no goal he is striving for. Yet the 3 main friends are willing to see others suffer in one way or another so that they can have what they want. Monty sells drugs. Jacob sexually accosts an underage student. And Frank adamantly keeps his priced right, quote unquote, apartment overlooking the devastation of the World Trade Center. And the movie seems to suggest a thought to its viewers. To what degree do we all live this way?
That sounds like a goddamn plot to me,
Yes.
Roger.
Shove that Pulitzer Prize square up your
Yes.
ass.
Oh, God.
Exactly. I was like,
No plot. You
No.
just described. All right. All
yes.
right. Continue.
Yeah, that's what he said. That's it. And then Oscar nominations were none.
Okay,
See, that's
now our next segment then is our reaction segment that we call Spotlight,
They knew, and they let it happen.
where we highlight and discuss our top takeaways of any kind from re-watching the film. I'm going to go first because I actually want to do the opposite of what we tend to do. Is I'm going to start with the negative first.
Go for
Because
it.
I have one major negative,
Sure.
and that is the teacher subplot.
Absolutely.
It is horrifyingly distracting. I don't mind it as like a story plot point. Like,
Yes.
I mean, that has existed in this world. I'm not an idiot. Like,
Yep.
teachers have been sexualizing students or vice
Yes.
versa. This is what, 2 hours and 25 minutes long or something like that. It's
Yeah.
like, it's about 2.5 hours.
Yep.
If they had just eliminated that entire unnecessary, does not drive it in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
From this, it would have been about 2 hours and 5 minutes, and it would have been a much more crisp story.
Yep.
It felt like a reason to give, and I can't remember his character's name off the top of my head. Jacob. It gave him a reason to have more scenes and more like sort of. There was nothing about that storyline. I will praise almost everything else about this movie,
Yes.
but that I'm starting with a negative for a reason because it was distracting from what this film was trying to do,
Yep.
in my opinion, and I was pissed every time that came up. I got mad. I was like,
Yeah.
this is dumb. Like, Anna Paquin, sure, she's a beautiful woman and halfway decent actor. I get it. She won an Oscar, but that doesn't mean she's good. Like, at no point in the entire thing,
No.
there's a few kind of comic relief moments where, like, Barry Pepper's character basically just calls him out right to his face.
Yeah.
And, like, there's some really good visuals that come from that whole thing. But other than that, it's an absolute useless plot
Yes.
point. So I'm starting with a negative on this one.
Well, I can see the effort of if the main character, Monty, has his last day of freedom before 7 years of prison.
Yeah.
And he's going through kind of a cycle of reflection, regret, seeing how his life choices have gotten him there. He does go to visit the preparatory school that the formative relationships that are part of this movie were established. And Jacob, his friend from that time, is now a teacher there. So it does make sense in the sense of having some character element from the teacher.
Had that scene been there,
Yes.
if just that scene been there and it would have
Yes.
been like this weird little subplot out of him, I'd
Yes.
been like, oh, okay, he's just a bit of a creep. That would have been fine.
Yes, but
Yep.
then I agree. When she shows up at the club
On like
as
a
16,
Thursday night or whatever.
yes, and manipulates her way in there, and he's like, oh, no big deal. And also to the fact of like Monty being all like kind of, he knows what's happening.
Yeah.
And being like, dude.
In a couple years, she's the same age as whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, no, okay.
Yeah,
It's
it
just-
was super
and
creepy.
I was I didn't like it back then either. Like,
No.
so, like this isn't even a because again, that plot point has worked in many other films.
Yes.
but this particular one, it just is so out of place and really frustrating.
Yes, to what end? Yeah.
All right, that was my first. I'm done with the negative.
Okay.
Done. Maybe.
There's no pivot, but I'll go for that.
Pivot.
I do remember seeing this film when it came out in the
Yeah.
theater with my friend Chad and really enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time feeling like it's the first film post 9/11
Mm-hmm.
that spoke to the attacks without necessarily having them be like a main plot point. Like it's all in the background in many ways, literal in some ways, but
Yeah.
also, you know, it uses the lights of the fallen towers in the opening credits, the backdrop of Frank's apartment overlooking Ground Zero, and then the fire stations and the firefighters impacted and dying from the destruction.
Yeah, and his dad was a firefighter.
Exactly.
Yep,
So it's all as a backdrop for the overall story of loss and resentment. And I always found that an interesting choice that the book had been written, which I did read after seeing it, and it's a very good adaptation to Benioff's credit. written before that happened and adapted it to include it in there.
Mhm.
And I always felt that was a really interesting, like, visceral experience a year or so after the attacks, and watching it, that was somewhat shocking in ways as well, being like, wow, a massive historical event is now being captured in a film less than a year later.
Mhm.
And like I mentioned, much to my chagrin, I texted you earlier today, this was also my first Spike Lee joint experience.
Yeah.
He had made many movies before this, and this was my first foray into the Spike Lee world.
Racist.
Yeah. Curses, you found me out. But anyway, I do remember seeing, like,
Tell me you grew up in a white suburb without telling me you grew up in a white suburb.
24, that was my first Spike Lee joint.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Well done. But this was such a interesting thing watching now again through the lens of, like, we're going to see more and more probably as we go through this of that kind of post 9/11 experience and what that was like. But this was, I remember at the time, definitely feeling like, well, they're leaning hard into this.
Yeah. I almost felt at the time it was like, it's weird knowing what we know now. So I will take yours and move into my next point, but it is, it's like, it's not a rah America story. Like, it's not,
no,
you know, and it's very reactionary to 9/11 without it being that.
Yep. And
it's all underlying, right? Like, almost to the point where I actually asked in my notes, is Monty a metaphor for the U.S. after 9/11? And I asked that, and I'll cover that in a little bit as well, but more to a Spike Lee standpoint. I think he does better than almost anybody in his movies and I understand Benioff adapted this, but, like, Spike Lee has this amazing ability to take historic events. Like, no matter what movie you watch of Spike Lee, he can make it modern.
Sure.
I could be watching Malcolm X, I could be watching Black Klansman, I could be watching Da 5 Bloods or this or any of these other movies, and he got game. Like, they're and yet he can tie it into whatever's happening in the moment at that time.
Yeah.
Better than almost anybody.
Yeah.
And I think what was so amazing from a 9/11 standpoint, and I didn't realize it then, and now I look back at it, there is an underlying anger throughout this entire film.
Yeah.
Just everybody in this movie is angry.
Yep.
And that's how we felt at the time.
Yeah.
It was just anger all the time. And so is Monty that sort of like catalyst to this, right? So Monty is angry, and everyone's angry at Monty, and everyone's angry at this, and there's just this underlying thing, and it just really tapped into that. And so coming off of that, but just to make my point about Spike Lee, is that to somehow tap into that feeling at the time and make a film and have Benioff and these like, I don't know. I just go like, that is so impressive to me when I watch this, to really tap into what's going on at the time, but not make it about this is not a 9/11 movie.
No,
this has nothing to do with it.
No,
except it has everything to do with it. It's like this weird thing.
Yeah. You mentioned Black Klansman, and that is a movie that's incredible from a time period movie. And at the end, they show Charlottesville.
Yep.
And what happened there. It's like, oh, wow.
Dang it, it's right here. Yeah, I forgot to mention that part. Right. It's literally like
history repeating itself.
Yep.
And yes, I think it's a bold choice of them to lean hard into the post 9/11.
Especially at the time.
Anger.
It was almost like you couldn't tap into it at all.
No. And the book was written in 2000. And what's interesting is the book has the tirade scene. So when Monty goes in the bathroom,
FU monologue?
Yeah. When he goes in the bathroom, it has a long FU monologue of all the slights and frustration and anger he would feel as a New York resident to all these, stereotypes across the board, race, religion, what have you. And then what's, I think, more powerful about that scene is that when all that catharsis and venting is done, it's just Monty looking at himself in the mirror and realizing what he's done and just tells himself, F you. Like, you had the world at your fingertips and you messed it up. Like, you were such an idiot. And that, what to me is a great storytelling device, where it's like, yeah, you can have like a cultural, societal frustration and angst as a backdrop.
Right.
But then you really quickly pivot to, no, from a character lens, it's just him. It's all error and bullshit, basically, where no, he's really just grappling with his own inferiority and frustration himself of, you had the world, you messed it up, you could have gotten out of this, and now you're paying the consequences for your hubris. Like, that was a great scene. Kudos to Edward Norton, but it's also funny, like, it works through the lens of this movie with 9/11, but it was written exactly like that in the book. Like, it wasn't made for the movie. It existed for that.
Are you changing subject after
No.
this? So I want to talk about that monologue, because that's actually one of my favorite monologues in film history.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is to everything you just said, but it also, it feels like a love letter to New York.
It is a weird,
it's this really
balance.
Like F
Yes.
you everything, but it's actually Monty just taking, it's like a kid taking out their anger
yes,
for being blamed on something or whatever on everything else in the world, right?
Yes.
Everything else in the world is to blame, but not me.
Yes.
But it is like they specifically call out races, religions, belief systems, basketball players. Like, doesn't matter. Like, everybody is
yes,
the worst in the world.
yes.
The black-hatted Hasidim strolling up and down 47th Street in their dirty gabardine with their dandruff, selling South African apartheid diamonds.
Come on, your wife deserves this.
The Wall Street brokers, self-styled masters of the universe, Michael Douglas, Gordon Gekko wannabe motherfuckers figuring out new ways to rob hardworking people blind. Send those Enron assholes to jail for fucking life.
And yet it's this weird love letter to New York City specifically.
Yeah.
And while it might be written that way, the way it's shot in the film is more the love letter, right?
Yes.
It's just that sort of
Totally.
That monologue is outstanding. I can't play any of it.
Yeah.
Or
It won't
anything
work for-
that.
it's
It
like
won't
50
work
times
for
he says
anything,
F,
you
yes.
know, but
This is not going to air. This will never be seen by anybody. This will never be seen by anybody.
yeah, it's so weird to see that sort of balance of Monty is taking all his aggression out on this terrible city, and yet it's all out of like love.
Yes.
It's really well done.
And it resonates more when at the end, his realization that he's going to prison,
Right.
he's driving there, and this monologue that we'll maybe talk about that his father gives.
Yep.
The flashes that go back to that monologue are the same things that he...
I think some of the same people too.
Yeah. Same people that he was chastising and lamenting are now seen through the lens of, this was what made this experience amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I want to pivot to that monologue actually, because that's the same point I had was that these are two of my favorite monologues, including the one at the end. I actually wish that the FU monologue, as I call it, was later in the film. Is so early in the film.
It goes really.
It could have been 45 minutes later, even just something where they're at the club and like maybe he goes to the bathroom and does it then, and not at the bathroom in the bar of his dad's bar. Like it's just. It felt so early, and it's so long. It is like a 10-minute monologue almost, it feels like. So maybe misplaced, but it's still outstanding. But it does come home, and it does get sort of like hammered home and delivered with Brian Cox's monologue as his dad, just talking about that. What if we went left instead of right, or didn't take this turn, what your world could look like. And
you're a New Yorker. That will never change. You got New York in your bones. Spend the rest of your life out west, but you're still a New Yorker. You'll miss your friends, you'll miss your dog, but you're strong. You got your mother's backbone in you. You're strong like she was.
Hey.
You find the right people and you get yourself
Hey, guy, why don't
papers.
you go ahead and have a seat.
A driver's license.
What's your name?
James.
James. Not from around here, are you?
No, I'm from out west.
Well, let's go ahead and get your picture. Be still, give me a smile. Okay. Just give me a bigger smile, James. Bigger, okay.
You forget your old life. You can't come back. You can't call, you can't write. You never look back. You make a new life for yourself, and you live it. You hear me? You live your life the way it should have been. And maybe, this is dangerous, but maybe after a couple of years, you send word to Natural.
The hope in his voice and that the entire monologue is, I mean, both of them are outstanding, but that one really drives it home. And I can't think of another movie that ends on a monologue like that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really know.
And a monologue that, so you joked before about Brian Cox. You know, this is the fourth movie we watched with him this year so far. Adaptation could have been number 5, but
could have been. Yeah,
you know, this was 2002 was the year of the Brian Cox.
Yeah.
So, you know, but what really resonates, and I will admit, I was like openly sobbing in the theater when I saw it.
Yeah, it hit me more in the theater than I did now. But yeah, I agree.
So it's weird now from a father-son dynamic that I didn't have then, but I do now, in terms of like being a father.
Yeah.
Because I clearly was a son then. But the voiceover monologue is such a great summary of, I will do whatever I need to do to protect you, and I will bring you out in the middle of nowhere, set you up for your new life, and never see you again.
Yeah.
And here's what I want you to do, and have your life. And then, you know, Natural can come years later, can come there, and you will eventually be able to tell your children about what your life was like here, that you had an opportunity and you messed it up. But here's your saving grace and your chance out. And I will happily do that for you. And it's a wonderful sequence. The music that they've used throughout, and the monologue is an incredible monologue about redemption and, you know, capitalizing on a new chance. And then it pivots right back to them in the car, driving up the freeway, and you know it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's
like his gift to his
soul-crushing.
son for just that, like,
yes,
here's this gift of hope, basically.
Yes.
Yep.
In 7 years, who knows what's going to happen? But it was just, and it still is like such a gut punch.
Yeah.
Gut punch. Like you just go, oh my God. Like it's so hard to watch that and feel like, oh, because I remember the time feeling like it's this really idealistic view of like what could have been. And then, nope, right back to where it is. And scene. It's like, yikes. So, but it doesn't diminish that impact. But it's
no, at all.
It really resonates. But I agree that having those two monologues are really, really good.
Yep.
I find it really interesting watching again Spike Lee's choice of having that one shot overlooking the World Trade Center.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, from the apartment?
Yeah, where Jacob and Frank, the two friends, and it's a long scene.
Very long.
Of them. It's almost like a play between them talking about Monty basically being done. Of, you know, Jacob's very idealistic of like, no, we'll see him. We'll talk to him. Like, and Frank's like, no, he's done. Like his life's over. And all of that through this kind of these friends grappling with how are we going to help our friend this last night he has of freedom, while that like realistic example of death and destruction behind them.
Yeah.
And it just was a really bold choice to me to see them grappling with these really weighty choices, all the while not cutting away.
Not at
probably
all.
5-6 minutes of dialogue.
Yeah, if not
with
more.
It just behind them. So yeah, it was a great scene.
Yeah, much appreciation to Spike Lee, who loves long scenes. It's very opposite to some of modern filmmaking where there's lots of cuts and things like that. Which is also a testament to the actors who can, do those scenes and stuff. That scene is outstanding. I mean, I guess I don't have too many other I have a few little like notes or whatever, but kind of a combination of points here, but I feel like they could have alternatively titled this film With Friends Like These, Who Needs Enemies? Because yikes, man.
Yeah.
Just yikes.
Yes.
Everything from even Natural, who you never know, but obviously Frank and Jacob are not like his best friends. They're his oldest friends. He's betrayed by somebody along the way.
Yes.
And he's betrayed by Katya or whatever it is.
Yes, the Russian dude.
Kostya.
Ukrainian.
Ukrainian. Yeah, but my point is that what always stood out to me beyond the monologues, and I remember now, is the GD beating scene at the end.
Oh God!
And that's where tying into both. It's like, that entire scene is so well done.
Yes.
Barry Pepper delivers probably one of his best performances in that scene.
Yes.
With Friends Like These, who needs enemies?
But yes, I wrote down like to that point of the I think really well done like story and character development. It does a great job of seeing these behind the scenes conversations, especially that one with overlooking World Trade Center.
Yep.
Of the honesty they present to their friends, but then it totally changes when in face-to-face situations they have to pivot. So, it's all, but then like challenge.
Frank,
but then Monty comes around
when Frank is up, when they're up in the club.
Yes,
he has a totally opposite reaction.
Yes,
I agree.
Then like it's like with Frank and Jacob talking about like no, but then when Frank and Monty are talking, and Monty's like, I'm not going to do well there.
Yeah.
And I have a favor to ask you. And he's like, yeah, whatever you need. And like, it'll be fine. Like, so you're right. Like with Friends Like These, it's a really great character study of the honesty that people have and the differences that come into play depending on these details. And like the obligation, the duty they feel to their friend to keep up appearances of it's going to be fine. But like 7 years is going to be brutal.
Yeah.
And it's not like a regular offense. Like you were a drug dealer, man. You're going to go away and it's going to be a hard time. So that's really fascinating. And all of this buildup of all this tension and frustration and angst and all these things to then, I agree, come to that scene where they go like the last morning, they're waking up, or not even woke, like they've been up all night. That's the moment where Monty says to Frank, this is the favor I need you to do.
Mm-hmm.
You need to F me up because I won't survive. Yeah. And that scene is just a great like gut punch of seeing Barry Pepper really do a great job of grappling with that weight of his friendship and the duty he has, and it comes out of nowhere. Because I remember watching it like,
there is
what is
nowhere.
happening?
Yeah, there's
it's just it's a story, but then all of a sudden, okay, this is happening. Like, Jacob, you got my dog. Thanks for that. Frank, mess me up.
Yeah, but even then, Frank actually comes in to protect Jacob.
Yes.
Like that was the catalyst. It was like he's actually protecting the weaker of the three of them.
Yes.
Yep.
And that was so great about that scene. It's like Monty knew I have to capitalize on the frustration and angst I have from my friends and the BS that we talk about. Like, and he, calls out Frank for being like, I know you want my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
You've been looking at her, and manipulates, well, who wouldn't? It's Rosario Dawson, but like he manipulates his friendship knowing and so the point where he's crying and then like thanks him.
Yeah.
And like stands up like, thank you. Like this is, and what really is a masterpiece for Ed Norton, I think. And he's a great actor.
Yeah.
But the external physical damage that I truly think represents his internal guilt and shame, that when he comes home and Natural finds him and he just has a breakdown. Mm-hmm. Like all his bravado and all these things of like, I had the world and I effed it up.
Yep.
And that to me is a really tough scene, but also really, really well done of all the actors involved. So I love this movie.
Yeah.
Yep. Thoroughly, don't say enjoy it.
No, and it's like, a hard one to recommend.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like one of those things of like, you really need to see it, truly.
Yeah.
But it's not enjoyable, but it's very profound
Yeah.
movie on like connection and your life choices and the impact you can have on the tiniest things. So
Sure.
anyway, I love it.
I have one final brief. Well,
That's all-
probably two. Are
that's
you
all I
done?
got. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay,
Are
so
you
I
done?
feel like are you done yet? I feel like Spike Lee is keeping the dolly shot companies in business for sure. Whoever runs that company is like, as long as I
Totally.
got Spike Lee,
Yep.
we can keep our doors
Hop
open.
on.
Good Lord. Nobody uses it more than him,
Mhm.
but also nobody uses it to better effect than him.
True.
Like when Hoffman comes out of the bathroom after the
Yes.
and he
And
just
it's
stares at it or
alright.
whatever, and you're just it's really good. But no, the last thing I have is I joked about it at the beginning, but does anyone do more with less than Brian Cox?
Oh God, the dude.
Like in any movie he's in, he was a character actor for years and years, and he
Yes.
always has enough scenes. Again, to the point that this is what our fifth Brian Cox or sixth Brian Cox movie.
Well, fourth for this year.
Fourth of this year,
Yes.
and then we obviously, I think we had him before.
No, we have X-Men 2 coming up.
Yeah,
Probably.
but didn't we have Brian Cox last year? I feel like we did because we joked about this at one point.
We did.
I'd have to look back.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There were 25.
Yep.
But like he's in so many things. You just kind of go like, wait, Brian Cox is in that? But he does so well with so little.
Yes.
Yeah, because like to your point, adaptation. It was like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like it's just he's so good in everything, and he is outstanding in this. But it's so interesting because he's not in it much at all.
No.
Physically, his face is only in this for like 5 minutes total, but he has this crucial like 7-minute monologue at the end, and that's it. So I mean, it's
You know what's crazy?
Yeah.
I'm just realizing.
What do you got?
We're going to talk about that. He's actually in our next movie coming up in October. He's in The Ring.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
I'm
Yeah.
looking at IMDb.
Yeah.
So that there would have been 6 movies.
Yeah.
That we could have covered.
John C. Reilly, we could have covered many in
We
this
could,
year
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I feel like there was none before this.
Super Troopers, and then
But
The
Super
Rookie.
Troopers was not our first Brian Cox one, was it?
I'm looking back through.
52 episodes now, which is still a pretty high percentage.
He only had 2,000 movies. Like, he didn't have anything in there, actually.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
But again, he's just all over
the emergence
Yeah.
of
Brian Cox.
the Cox.
The emergence of Cox.
Yep.
All right, so with our reactions out of the way, that leads us into our next segment that we call The Verdict.
I'm going up there, I'm going to try it, I'm going to let the jury decide.
This is pretty much exactly how it sounds. Each of us takes a minute to put a cap on our reviews, give a rating, and whether or not the film holds up 2 decades later. Do you want to go first?
You can go first.
All right. My verdict, I found myself not liking it as much in some ways and loving it in ways I did not expect. 20 years later, I especially love the cultural connectivity to the post 9/11 world and how fresh the pain was, but none of us could talk about at the time. The performances are all top notch, and the direction is great as always with Spike Lee. In the end, I would place it actually top 5 in Lee's filmography, which is easy for you because have you seen 5 Spike Lee films?
3?
Sure, racist. But it's not one I would recommend to the Lee novice. For that, I would say Black Klansman or Inside Man are your better bets if you've not seen a Spike Lee film.
Yep.
However, I would say 7 out of 10. Absolutely go see it. Holds up, yes, but in different ways than I kind of thought going into it. But it's, I do love this movie. I would recommend it to anyone when you're ready to watch it.
Yep. Can I totally cop out and say I forgot to write a verdict?
Just make it up. Why? Just make it up as you go.
But truly, as you were saying, like, oh my God, yes, everything.
Sure, I'll just copy and paste.
Can I say my verdict is ditto?
Ditto.
But that being said, yes. My verdict
I'm the one who doesn't do research.
No,
That's fine.
I totally forgot. I'm sorry.
Oh,
There wasn't about. No, but in all seriousness, it was my first Spike Lee joint that I had not seen one before. Again, apparently I'm a racist. I haven't seen many after.
Admitting it's the first step.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not saying it. You're the one.
Who brought this up? Wow, who brought race into the equation? Spike Lee did.
It's a really somber and moving portrayal of what life choices can lead to. And I always remember thinking at the time, and still now, they can have unintended consequences, so be mindful of what that looks like. Again, I lamented in Gangs of New York, having an intimate revenge story through the backdrop of a larger thing, and that didn't work. This is the opposite. It is a very intimate story of not even redemption, but just regret and how you manage that through a larger backdrop of a seismic historical event. And across the board, acting, fantastic. And it's well worth your time. Check it out.
All right, so we come now to our final segment, which is Quiz Show.
The exciting quiz program, 21.
Where we search for trivia surrounding our subject film and try to stump the other. I do have a couple.
I have two.
All right. Go ahead. You can go first.
So speaking of him, Philip Seymour Hoffman has been awarded an Oscar for his fantastic work in Capote.
I was like, do I have to name the film? Because I can name that film. That's easy. Like,
Low-hanging fruit.
easy.
Move on.
I'm done.
And he starred in countless films before his, unfortunately, untimely death at the age of 46 in 2014. Yet it was on the small screen where he made his acting debut in 1991, playing a small part in what long-running Dick Wolf created crime procedural.
Oh yeah, Law and Order.
Dun 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 dun.
Which, if you haven't seen it yet, the John Oliver segment on Law and Order is outstanding.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. I actually have, because
Law and Order.
I watched the first 10 seasons of that show
Sure.
all the time. Yeah, Law and Order.
PSH.
So of the principal three friends, Norton, Pepper, and Hoffman, who is the oldest?
Oh man, that's a really good. I'm gonna guess Pepper.
Okay, so Barry Pepper was born in 1970. Edward Norton was born in 1969, and Philip Seymour Hoffman was born in 1967.
Ooh,
You blew it!
So technically, Norton's the oldest.
Yeah. I was like, depending on when you ask the question, you dick.
Technically, Edward Norton's older than Philip Seymour Hoffman. Is it too soon? Is it too soon? But yes, Philip Seymour Hoffman was technically the oldest at
of the
this
friends
filming of this movie.
at the time of the movie, but since then,
couldn't resist, man.
Oh my
Couldn't
god,
resist.
you are Are you in the crosshairs of the woke mob?
Either way, you were wrong, though. Just so
Either
we're
way,
clear.
yeah, exactly. I guessed wrong.
You guessed the youngest
across the board.
Yeah, but
wow.
Yeah, there you go.
So, composer Terrence Blanchard, he's composed almost all of Spike Lee's joints and has been nominated for 2 Academy Awards for Best Original Score, both of which were Spike Lee joints.
Yeah.
One was in 2018 and the second in 2020. Can you name those 2 Spike Lee joints?
I mean, Defy Bloods, he was definitely nominated for, and then was it Black Klansman?
It
as
was
well?
indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been the most recent ones.
Yep. Yeah, a huge career in lots of different areas in jazz and instrumentalism. And then, the last couple of years, he's been nominated.
Yeah, I know Anya and Swan hate The Five Bloods, but I really love that movie, actually.
I should check it out. Again, I'm racist, so.
You're racist. All right, so sports ball trivia, Tim.
Sports ball!
Sports ball trivia. Monty's friend Kostya, the fat Ukrainian, is played by Tony Siragusa. In fact, it is his only film role. He did have a few TV roles, including in The Sopranos.
Okay.
Tony was most famous for playing 12 seasons in the NFL as a very great defensive nose tackle for the Indianapolis Colts, and eventually won a Super Bowl for what all-time defensive team in 2000?
2000.
I mean, I think the Super Bowl would have been 2001 technically,
okay, yeah,
but
sure.
the season was,
It was not the Bucks. Ravens?
Correct. The Baltimore Ravens. Look at you before you became a football fan.
Look at that. that?
The Goose, Tony Saragusa, rest in peace. He actually died earlier this year. But yes, he
was always on the sidelines.
Yeah, yep, for Fox and stuff like that.
Holy
Yeah.
shit.
Yep. So
that's totally
much
him.
credit to him. Not a great accent, but an NFL player for 12 years shows up on a Spike Lee film to do a Ukrainian accent.
Movie?
That's his only film credit.
I
of any
thought
kind.
I'm like, I know this guy. From
I mean, you
somewhere.
gotta give him some credit on that one. Like Tony Saragusa.
I can completely see him being like a sideline reporter of stuff.
Yeah.
On like, oh my
Yeah,
god,
through Fox. That's Tony
That's
Saragusa.
crazy.
He did a great job in this. I mean,
he did.
If you were a trained actor and that kind of stuff, you'd be like, yeah, it's a decent accent.
Yes.
But I'll be damned if he doesn't. And he's not only in one scene; he's in like half the movie. It feels like. So yeah,
That's
the Goose.
good.
There you go.
The Goose. Nice. That's all I got. Wow. Well done. Ooh, I got the sports ball right.
Sports ball. All right, so that brings us to the end of our happy hour episode on 25th Hour. I guarantee you none of you have seen it, but please go check it out.
Please do.
If you haven't already, please go back and listen to our previous episodes, all featured on your favorite streaming platforms, YouTube, or on our website. And stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where we will re-watch. That's a weird sentence.
Yeah.
The Ring
with Brian Cox
together, and also Red Dragon, which. You know, there you go. Manhunter, Brian Cox.
Exactly. Manhunter. And
oh my God, it's all about Cox.
Synergy.
If you are missing our high fidelity segment, that is now a video segment that is featured all over our online platforms. So go find us for even more lists and opinions. We want to say thank you for taking the time to listen and for clicking that like or subscribe button on your devices. Find us on Twitter at years_beers and on Facebook, or head to 20years4beers.com. This has been 20 Years 4 Beers. My name is Steve.
Tim.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Don't besmirch the banquet.
That sounds like a goddamn plot to me.
Mess me up.
Look
at that.
Are you done yet? Sure, racist. Oh my God, it's all about Cox.
And scene.
Cut! Cut! Cut!